You're listening to the Coop Homeschool Podcast.
This is your podcast for community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling. This is Mandy.
And Jessica.
And this is The Coop. Today, it's our book club. So this is our second part of Homegrown. Adventures in Parenting Off the Beaten Path, Unschooling, and Reconnecting with the Natural World by Ben Hewitt. So today we're going to be talking about Chapter 4, Drive, Chapter 5, The Early Years, and Chapter 6, Big Sticks. So if you haven't read Chapter 1, 2, and 3, go back and listen to our other episode about a month ago.
Yep.
And you can hear all about those chapters. So first, let's get started on the scoop on the coop.
That's right. You want me to go first?
Sure.
All right. So I'm really excited because I decided that I'm going to take my own professional development course. So I spent a lot of time studying homeschool things and working towards my own children's education, but I'm still a practicing dance educator. And so every once in a while, I just get the itch to keep learning. So this semester, I'm taking social emotional learning for dance.
I love that. I can't wait to hear what I get to learn because you take it.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited because we get to just really learn how to apply social emotional learning and the CASEL framework into dance education, and it's a practical application. So we're not just learning about the information in theory, but we actually have to provide ways that we're going to implement it into our curriculum and syllabi. So that's really cool.
That's awesome. Sounds like royalty when you talk about a castle.
It's CASEL.
Oh.
Yeah, an acronym. Yeah, so it's CASEL framework, which is all about social emotional learning. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So maybe after I take the course, I'll have more to share.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we just started Math UC.
Oh, yeah.
So we switched from Right Start Math, which is a great curriculum,
Yes.
but I needed less me heavy
Right.
as a teacher. And so Math UC has these DVDs. So my son is doing Gamma, my daughter's doing Beta, and my other daughter is doing Alpha.
Yes.
And so I'm just doing one lesson a day, and then I'll start slowing down when I see that they can't keep up, and
Right.
I'll let it span over a couple days. But it was so great because it's so easy to get math in now.
Right.
And then there's a couple worksheets that they can do. And then I'm like, okay, just do like 2 or 3 of these.
Yeah.
And if you get them all right, then we're not going to do the rest of them.
Right.
So, so far we've done 2 days of that, and it's been awesome. I'm like,
is
we can
awesome.
definitely do this every day.
Yeah.
So that's our scoop. So should we dive into
Yes,
Homegrown?
let's do it. Chapter 4.
Chapter 4, Drive. So I had for my theme that this is more about imprisonment versus liberty.
Oh, okay. I wrote down the theme as being throwing convention out the window, redefining what it means to live a good life, and making it unique to oneself.
Oh, yeah. That's the liberty part, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So he gives his story of how he dropped out of high school as soon as he could, which was age 16.
Yep.
And he
With
said,
his parents' blessing.
right.
Yes.
And he said he couldn't have become the writer that he is today if he hadn't dropped out of school.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting. And how amazing that his parents actually blessed that, because his dad was educated, I know, at Johns Hopkins. Which
They were
is,
professors or professionals with advanced degrees,
Yeah.
both of his parents.
right.
Yeah.
So that must have been a really hard thing to come out of convention, right? So, okay. So should we dive into some main nuggets?
Yes.
So I want to read this one quote. Out there was the world I wanted to know and understand. So he's talking about dropping out of school.
Yes.
Out there was the tangible world, the world where knowledge and experience did not depend on memorizing what I was told to memorize, what the regulations told me I must learn, but on doing. I wanted to be out there, immersed in a world that made sense to me, that had not been reduced to formulas, equations, and rules. I wanted to explore and try and understand my connection to this world and my place within it.
Right.
And he talks about this, and I was also thinking too, like, how sad that for those who aren't meant to be in a conventional, traditional school system, but are stuck in one, they can't behave in the way that they want to behave and are meant to behave until they're an adult. And so how much is lost in that convention because they're stuck in it, or imprisoned in it. Is really sad. And so I love that he took the risk and his parents allowed him to take the risk to burst out of that.
Yeah, and I think that his way of saying, like, explore the world he wanted to be a part of is really key. For some of us that are more risk averse, we like the formulas, we like that kind of stuff. It didn't feel stifling necessarily.
Right.
I do see how it could be more. There could have been more to education besides that. But, I didn't feel overly stifled by that type of education.
Right. Well, and then I should have looked this up, but I know there's some country like Sweden or somewhere where they actually allow the high schoolers to kind of just do self-study, but they still show up to the brick and mortar.
Okay.
And they get to sit there and read all day if they want to.
Oh, nice.
So the parents can still go to work. They can still drop off and know their 14-year-old and 15-year-old are in safe places, and they're going to graduate with a diploma.
Right.
But they give like free reign to these high schoolers.
Right.
And I thought that was such a cool way to experiment with a new model. And that's what I'd like to see more here.
Sure.
So, and that's kind of what the charter schools do.
Yeah, I think charter schools are definitely kind of trying to do that as much as they're able to gain momentum and freedom to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
If they can move away from state standards where they exist, that makes it easier for them to really pursue that. But charters perform really well across the board. They have great results in diverse neighborhoods. So
So I know, had something to say about.
So he goes on to quote Peter Gray, Free to Learn, which is a book that I've recommended before. And I love that he talks about, what does he say? Oh, yes. He says that school is like a prison, right? But almost
provocative.
Right. But almost nobody beyond school age is willing to say it. And that's what I found super interesting, is that's so true. We have convinced ourselves, or many people have convinced themselves, that school is just necessary. Yeah, it feels like you're in prison all day. Sorry, you got to do it. It's a rite of passage. It's a way of living. And, that's such a profound thing to throw out the window.
Right.
Because it's just a part of growing up.
Right.
And so I thought that was very interesting that he used that word prison. Even, and I read about that in Free to Learn. And so when he called that out, I was like, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to talk about there are people who do well in this institutionalized environment. And it made me think of myself.
Right.
I loved school, the years I was in public traditional school, because the subject matter wasn't important to me. I didn't find it particularly interesting, but I wasn't bored out of my mind. And so being able to get all my spelling words right and get an A and get my name on the board was really exciting.
Right.
And so then that was my own motivation to keep doing well. And then it just came easy to me.
Right.
That kind of formulaic or memorization wasn't a big deal to me.
Yeah, it was fun to compete to see if I could turn in my worksheet faster than anyone else in my 6th grade class,
Right. And then I gravitated towards the other kids in class who were very similar. So in most of my class, or most of my grades from 3rd through 6th, there's a group of us girls who were just overachievers in that sense. And so we all would be together as much as we could, work on projects as much as we could, and would always be the ones going above and beyond because we felt like this system rewarded people like us.
Right. And like I said in our introductions episode, I thrived in that.
Yeah.
I loved it. And it was a great place for me. I mean, there was still the struggle and there was still the, different groups of girls or the, being worried about what to wear and am I going to be alone when I show up to school? Is any of my friends going to be there? So you're still struggling on a day-to-day basis with things you would never really struggle with as an adult. But it's not for everyone. And for many, it is like a prison. It's compulsory and you get told what to do more than, he even says this, or Gray says this. You get told what to do more than even a prison.
Yes.
You have less freedom than the adults in prison.
Almost every minute is planned out for you in school.
Yeah. And then when you think of it like that, like when I had a friend who had homeschooled her whole life and went for 1 year to high school. She said, I thought it was so weird that a bell had to tell me when to show up for class.
Right.
And a bell had to
Seriously?
tell me
Yeah.
that it was okay to go to the bathroom and to eat. Like I had to get permission to go to the bathroom. Like,
What is that?
yeah, like what am I working in a factory?
Right.
And that was so weird to me when she said that, because I was like, huh, I never thought of it like that.
Right. It seemed orderly to me.
Yeah, exactly. You have to get there by the second bell.
Right.
Or you get a tardy.
Right, obviously. Yeah, but I think that really just speaks to my character or my disposition in general. You know, I'm definitely a rule follower, you know, risk averse. And so I don't want to break the rules. So this type of place was somewhere that was easy for me to thrive because I knew the rules and therefore it was safe.
Yeah.
Now, you know, I think, you know, we know where this is heading, is that that's obviously not a good fit for everybody. But what I wanted to touch on real quick before we move on is that, you know, I think that that's when I came out of school. Even once I started homeschooling, I still went directly to the community college. So I never really left the traditional education model. I just basically went, I did independent study at home for 2 years, and, you know, because that was middle school.
Yeah.
But I had a teacher, I had all the assigned coursework. I just did it all at home. So
Right.
I was doing school at home.
Right. That's
And
true.
then I went into the community college at 14.
Right.
And so I think that's really what dictated my whole career path at that point, because I wasn't left any freedom to feel creative or be creative, but I thought that I did.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. That's why you hear now, you read all these articles of how important internships are.
Yes.
When you're in college.
Absolutely.
Because you've never had the freedom really to develop your own interests.
Right.
There's no room in the formal school to take the classes you actually want to take.
Right.
You know, you can't take photography if you have to take 6 APIB
Right.
honors courses.
Right.
Because you're trying to get into a really good school.
Right.
But photography could be
Yeah, it's
your
your
future
calling.
career. Yeah. So, and so that's why internships become so important when you go to college or in the summer before college and after, you know, between each year. But if you had that freedom early on to go volunteer at the Humane Society,
Exactly.
to have your own little side business when you're 14, you know,
Yeah.
you could be testing all of that stuff out
Exactly.
at a younger age.
Exactly. As an example to that, that was the advice I gave my niece and nephews, who are now all young adults, about 5 years ago. They were looking for summer jobs. They really wanted to make money. And I said, you know what, you guys? You have it easy. Your mom is taking care of you. She works her booty off to take care of you and provide for you. She's not asking for anything. So do you really need more spending money? Were you planning to contribute to the house? Or were you just looking for something to do and make money while you're doing it?
Right.
I said, this is your opportunity to pursue something you're interested in. And one of them was photography. I said, call a local photographer. This is wedding season. Can you at least shadow them?
Yeah.
Can you carry their equipment for them?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're not actually holding the camera.
Right.
There is so much to be learned from a mentor.
Definitely.
You know, so internships, even, you know, thinking of it more like a mentorship, you know, become a mentee.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
Yeah.
trying to make sure mentor, mentee. Become a mentee
Yeah.
and learn from somebody who's doing that job. Maybe it isn't for you.
Yeah.
But how are you going to know?
Right. And how cool if in the future, if we can use our Coop group and the moms
Right.
in our community, we've all had jobs before we had kids.
Absolutely.
We could all even just, you know, do some side things and involve the kids in that and see if it's something they're interested
I've
in.
loved being a mentor to young dancers. So, you know, once they grow out of the levels of dance that I teach, because I teach 8 and under, when they get to be about 13, 14, they usually come back asking, can I assist your class? And so, you know, we go through this mini training program teaching them to be teachers' assistants, and then they get to observe, and then you can see who's interested in doing this, who just likes to hang out with kids.
Yeah, right.
You know, who just loves dancing. And so
Right.
it's actually such a great opportunity for them. And then to see why I do things. I don't just stick to a list. Now I get to share my whole thought process
Yeah.
behind why I'm choosing this activity. Like I said with my professional development course, now I'm going to implement these tools, you know, so I can see that this kid is feeling this.
Right.
How can I shift my activity to focus on helping with that particular
Right,
issue?
right.
You know, and so they can see me change
Doing that,
gears.
yeah. Yeah.
But something they wouldn't have noticed if they didn't work intimately with me.
Right. Yeah. And we have a full-time lawyer in our Coop
Exactly.
group.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she could definitely, take on some of the kids when they're older, if anyone's interested in law. And so there's just more opportunity for that to pursue your interests and when you're not in a compulsory situation.
I know a lot of young adults too, and I felt this, and I'm wondering, now I'm seeing more of a correlation. I wonder if it's a lot of us who felt really comfortable in the institutionalized setting, and we get through college and we're supposed to go into our career.
Oh, yeah.
And then I felt like I was floundering.
Oh, totally.
I'm like, I have to do this forever?
Yeah.
What is this? So I was 21, 22, and I'm like, this isn't, like, it's fine.
Yeah.
But all I want to fill my time with now is reading the books I want to read and taking the dance classes I want to take. But now there's not enough time to do all of that because I'm working 9 to 5.
Right.
And so I think that that's definitely something that I've noticed, that trend of, what is it, the quarter life crisis?
Oh, I haven't heard of that.
Oh, yeah. And there's a trend, the kids who are 25, 20 to 25-ish, out of college, should be starting their careers or a career path, and then they just feel really lost and drowning. And to me, it's no wonder. You're not really left with tools to explore the world.
Right.
You're left with ways to follow the rules.
Right.
But if no one's giving them to you.
Yeah, well, I was in a graduating class of at least, I think, 1,000 psych majors at UCLA. And when they, in our senior class, they said, okay, a raise of hands of who knows what they're doing, they're graduating. And like 2 people raised their hand.
Right.
And thank goodness I had been coaching swimming. So because I was coaching an adult swim team, I was talking to my mom about it. And she goes, oh, you might like teaching then if you really like coaching. And I was like, oh. And I mean, I had taken an education course or two just as part of my psych major. Yeah. So I was like, oh, yeah, okay. So went into that. And it's like, man, if I hadn't been coaching, I'd be like, oh, the PhD is next.
Right. You just go down the path.
That is the next thing in line is the PhD, know? So, Anyway, so the fact that he had to quit school to become who he wanted to be is just a complete paradigm shift.
Right. Absolutely.
So,
How neat, though, that he knew that enough about himself and was confident enough to go and do that.
Right. Oh, and he talks about what you were just mentioning, like the perpetuating success. Like people like you and me, we did well in the school, so we like it more, and then we're more involved, and then we like it even more, and then and we're, but he says it's a myth that traditional school's for everyone.
Oh, for sure.
And same with homeschool.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of like, you don't really know until you're doing it, right?
Right.
So I thought it was really interesting when he was talking about his kids' peer group.
Oh, yes.
So he was saying they would be the weird kids, because they want, to do archery. I mean, they want to do really cool things, actually.
Oh, totally.
It's amazing, and tap the maple trees and stuff. But they went to a slumber party.
Yes.
And they were flabbergasted at how the kids wanted to just play video games.
Right.
But it's probably because they actually get to go do the real hunting, where the kids who are doing the video games are hunting on the video games.
Right.
Or, etc.
Yeah,
But
I thought that one was really interesting, because, there's times now that my child is 8, my oldest child is 8, where we encounter conflict with friends. And it's very minor. We don't get a lot of outside influence, but there's definitely more than these kids, than Ben Hewitt's kids have experienced. And so it makes me think, I almost like this, like their siblings or their primary social interaction with, a peer group. Then they're learning with their parents. I don't hate that.
Well, because then you get to see who they are meant to be. Like when I've been told by other people, well, that, your son wasn't doing something that was cool. And so then now those kids might not want to be his friend. It's like, why are we as adults talking about what is cool?
Right. He's doing what he wants to do. That should be celebrated in its own way.
Yeah, like that's like, oh, what a cool kid.
Right. Not celebrated even, just accepted.
Yeah,
he's doing his thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's what's cool.
Right.
So going back to like the prison thing a little bit, it's distance from community, he says. So what if the greater good isn't so good after all? It also assumes, perhaps not overtly, but certainly inadvertently, The children have no other meaningful way to contribute to the portion of their community that exists beyond the classroom walls, beyond fulfilling the expectations of these standardized curriculums. The irony is that the more we distance children from their broader communities by forcing them to attend school for the majority of their waking hours, the fewer opportunities they have to contribute to society in ways that cannot be measured by classroom performance. And so it's just and then he says again, it's a self-perpetuating cycle. And so they're completely separated from community. And you even see that in churches. Like in churches, the kids are separated from the families are separated. Right. And they're not worshiping as families anymore. And that was a big trend, probably started in like the 80s maybe.
Sure.
And again, they're being separated. They're with their peer groups. They're not with all ages anymore. And so now there's a swing in that other direction as more churches are more teaching to the children.
Family service.
Families, finally. Yeah. And because, you know, we're all one community. Yeah. So why do we keep separating out all the time?
Right.
So I really liked that. So I don't know. Did you have anything else for that chapter? That was kind of the heavy chapter.
He talked about, you know, he often sits and starts to think about what is in his kid's future. But then he worries that he's projecting too much of what he hopes and dreams for them. And that's something that I can really feel. Like I daydream what my kid's future will look like, you know, and sometimes I'll even say it out loud. Maybe not to them so much, or, you know, I do like, you can do that. If you want to be a writer, you can.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to come off as that's what I expect them to do or that's what they have to do just because they like it. Right. You know, so it's definitely that careful line when you're trying to raise kids who find their own way in life. You know, you want to be careful, but I'm just so excited. Like it comes from a place of just loving to watch them explore, loving to see them engage in different things and find their own unique interests outside of mine.
Totally.
It's fascinating to me. I'm like, I didn't introduce her to this.
Yeah.
Like,
and then you get to learn because of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I think that's wonderful. And I think our kids will be able to feel that energy from us and that excitement and know that just liberates them even more to pursue.
Yeah.
So I have one more thing.
Okay.
I was just a little experiment. I didn't realize it was this chapter. So he asked his 8-year-old, if you could have any 3 things in the world, what would they be? And he said traps, a donkey, and a cabin.
Yes. And he thought, wow, what a weird kid.
Yeah. How are we going to do this? You know? And so I asked my kids the same thing.
That's awesome.
So my youngest said Lego Friends cruise ship.
Yeah.
Potato chips and Doritos and more Legos.
There you go.
And then my middle child, my 8-year-old said, well, would I still have all of you? Oh. And I thought that was really sweet. Like her first
a great question. Like, am I stranded on a desert island and I'm picking the only 3 things I can have?
Yeah. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, I still have like Micah and Maisie and you and, you know, and she starts listing off all these people. I was like, oh yeah, you'd have all the people. So then she said, okay, well, if that's the case, I want a Lego Friend Hospital, millions of dollars, and a brand new house.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking a lot about home and creating a home, like what kind of character and personality will your future home have? Sure. And then we started talking about decorating. What do they want their room to feel like when they walk in their room? And then my son, I was actually expecting him to be like, oh, grow closer to God, because that's been coming up a lot. Yeah. Well, he said an autograph ball by Trout.
Yep.
An Angels player, $10 million.
Oh, 10. Mm-hmm.
And the Diagon Alley Lego set. Although he'll have $10 million, but but I think it's just a fun question to ask your kids every now and then, you know, just to see where their heart is and what they're yearning for and interested in.
That's cute.
And you know, and you never know what you're going to get. It could be their vocation. Like, the thing I would want most of all is to go live in South Africa and work with the animals.
Yeah. You'll have to mark and date that page.
I know, yeah.
And come back to it in 15, 20 years.
Yeah, and see, So anyways, so I think that was all of chapter 4 for both of us.
Yes.
Okay, so chapter 5, the early years. Did you have a theme for that?
Let's see. I wrote down the journey to unschooling by both the observance of their sons and by really allowing them space and time to pursue interests. even when is trapping and skinning skunks.
Oh.
I elaborated. That was like I guess it's more of a summary than a theme.
Yeah,
but
totally. Yeah.
it's the way my brain works. Yeah.
Totally. And I thought what I got out of it was personal conviction.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, okay, so I'll go.
Sure.
Okay. I just want to, it says, okay, there's a quote here. He says, "True, we did not know precisely how learning would unfold or how our days would be structured, but we knew with confidence that belied our inexperience as both parents and educators that our boys would not attend school." And they're saying it may have been naive and arrogant, but he said everybody, has those assumptions, whether it's they will attend school or they won't. And what I noticed about either one of those decisions is however we decide to educate our kids, it's not based on because we know our kids. It's based on our personal conviction.
Right.
I knew I was going to homeschool before I ever met my children. And so that's a personal conviction and a personal calling. And most of the homeschoolers I talk to, unless they pulled their kid out because of some trauma that was happening,
Yes.
or because of COVID and this weird state that we're in right now, they homeschool because of personal conviction. And then there's a lot of people who put their kids in traditional school because of personal conviction.
Exactly.
That is the way to go.
Yes.
And there's just a small group who's not sure, who might dip their foot in and out and test it out. But, and I think that's just interesting, these personal convictions we have, and that it's important to pay attention to them.
Right.
And so I love that they went with their personal conviction to buy land and homestead it and build their house with their own two hands and not have running water and because it's a strong personal conviction, you give up luxuries. Like I have an MBA. I could be making a lot of money.
Yeah.
And we give that up because of what we get so much more riches out of me being home. And so I remember, and then my husband was in school forever. And I remember when he was in school and we were only using couches from off the street and we would rotate them when we would find a better couch. We would just take our couch, drop it off at the dumpster and pick up a new one. And I remember telling my mom, man, I wish we could just buy a couch. Like someday I'd really like to just buy a couch. I'm so tired because I won't even sit on a couch that like has any crumbs or is dirty or anything. And she said, but that's not the choice you made. Like, Marcus is in seminary. Like that was your choice to like give up a second income for him to be in school and have student loans and do all that. That was your choice. And when you made that choice, you also chose to have dumpster couches. And it's like, that's true. I'm not, so it just gave me a different lens, on all of that. I'm so thankful I can actually find a cute dumpster couch and then put a slipcover over it.
Exactly.
If I need to. So it's just, that's how strong the personal conviction is for all of us moms and hopefully most of the dads too. And so when someone comes to us and tries to talk us out of homeschooling, they have no idea what they're dealing with. Like, when they want to debate things, most of the time we won't even engage in the debate because we know it's such a strong personal conviction. Right. There's no convincing.
Right. This is deeply rooted in my soul.
Yeah. So for us to rebel in this way against like widely accepted convention in the world, for us to rebel against that takes a lot of strength and conviction.
It does. Yeah.
So I just love that he showed his personal conviction and that it was a calling for them and what that all entailed was just insane with their homestead and all that. So
definitely. At one point in the chapter, he refers to success in traditional schools as hollow rewards. So we talked about that a little bit in chapter 4, just because we were talking about prison and institutionalized education. And, that wanting to keep succeeding, that drive to keep succeeding. But I felt like I was floundering after because what were those rewards? Nothing.
Yeah. Just some grade that...
Right. They maybe instilled a good work ethic.
Oh, yeah.
There's definitely a few things that you could take out and apply to everything else in your life, but even still, it wasn't really, there was no theological aspect.
Oh, right.
There was no character training. There was no vocational training.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And then on the playground, it's survival of the fittest.
Exactly.
So it's not even like you're getting all the time, the socialization that people mention. I don't know that it's always good socialization skills that people are getting on the playground with barely any supervision, barely anyone navigating the situation. And it's a dog eat dog world out there, you know? And so the things that are being touted aren't always like he said, it's not really the greater good that we're looking at here.
Right. Being successful socially at school, that's usually pretty hollow.
Yeah.
It's usually pretty superficial.
Right.
You're not usually popular because you're super
kind.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that. But you know what I mean? Like, it's just, so that really resonated with me when you said that. Hollow rewards.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Like I almost went through my own process of deschooling after college.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Getting to read a book for the first time that you want to read.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so...
Do you want me to go again?
Yeah, go ahead.
So he discussed what they wanted to do. So this is part of their personal conviction. They observed some Waldorf education at some point, his wife Penny.
That's right.
And so she felt really strongly that Waldorf was the way to go.
Oh, right.
And she felt like it kind of checked all these boxes. It was still super gentle in that sense, but it's very guided.
Okay, yeah.
So Waldorf isn't very freeform. And it's similar to Montessori. Like, you're still going through curriculum, but it's done in a very specific way.
Right.
So their eldest son started Waldorf at 5, and it was supposed to be, let's sit down and draw this together. And he hated it. And days of tears by both son and mom. And she was like, I don't know what to do, but I feel like this is wrong. She felt it because it was going against the conviction. What she had planned was something that she thought was reaching her goal, but it really wasn't.
Right.
And so I thought that was really interesting. And then he struggled to learn in groups of peers, because she tried to find different situations, thinking, okay, well, maybe the one-on-one isn't it? So let's find a peer group for him. But in his early childhood, peer groups weren't the right thing. He didn't know how to acclimate. It wasn't natural to him. That's not how he wanted to learn. And so they realized that's really just not for him. And so they had been a part of this almost like a forced school, like what was it? Yeah, so it was like a tutor for outdoor learning. And at that group, they decided to ask the tutor if they would come to his house and give him private lessons. And then by the time he was 8 years old, social situations weren't as difficult. And so he was joining the peer group for these nature skills and still working with the tutor, because this is just where his passion was. So he must be very much like his father, I would imagine, based on the stories. Is he just needed to be in his world.
Right.
And for him, it was nature and the earth and building and learning and trial and error, which is very much this personal conviction idea. Like, sometimes you have to try it for yourself to find that conviction and to find that really confident, attitude towards what you're pursuing.
Right.
And so I thought that was really interesting that, they were just so in tune, like you were saying, very observant about their children, and said, okay, it doesn't mean that there's a problem because he's not socializing or interacting in a typical way. It just means he's not ready for that.
Right.
And they did that, and it was brilliant. It worked for them.
Yeah, and if they had dropped him off every day at a school for 8 hours, they would have never known. It would just be low test scores.
Right.
And then they would have gotten him tutors. And
ADHD. All of these things, because that's what we think of when we see that behavior. A child who can't conform to sitting and listening for hours on end.
To being in a factory, basically. Yeah. So I kind of playing off that of him being out and doing things, they were talking about the skills, and these skills this is Ben now, these skills feel important to me because they are the skills of a particular place, having arisen from their connection to this land and community. And they feel important because they are true life skills that is rapidly being lost in a society where many people do not even know how to change a tire or hold an axe. And my head went immediately to my dad. So my dad is an aerospace engineer and a mechanical engineer, and now he's a professor, but he worked for Boeing for, decades. And when he was a kid growing up, he had an older brother and 3 younger brothers. And they lived in Orange County, California, where it was all orange trees still. And they had this little house, and they were always working on it, adding on with their own 2 hands. They walked around with their BB guns, shooting at rattlesnakes, sometimes getting each other on accident.
Yep.
And so they did all the add-ons to their house. And then what does he become? An engineer. Right. And what can he do? Almost anything with his hands. And now he has a little Disneyland amusement park in his backyard.
It's so cool.
That my kids can ride, that I can ride.
Right.
And so that made me just think of my dad. Like, he had the opportunity and freedom to do that. And he was traditionally schooled.
Sure.
But he also wasn't in all the extracurriculars after school as well. He was part of Future Farmers or 4-H club or whatever, and had his own animals that he put in the Orange County Fair. So he got to develop his interests and do all that. And so just having those true life skills is so rare these days. And we have to go to Home Depot for the Saturday morning class to learn how to make
a birdhouse.
Hammer a nail into a piece of wood. It's crazy.
Yeah, I agree.
So that resonated with me. Mm-hmm. I believe, and he also says, I believe it is crucial for children to learn in ways that are not held in isolation, that involve the body as well as the mind, and that result in something real and tangible. Yeah. So,
And then there's this little anecdote that he puts in there about, I can't remember which son. I think it was the younger son, maybe the older son. And he was playing with a pop gun somewhere, or he saw one somewhere, and his mom saw that he loved it and he was super interested in it. And so she thought, you know what? I'm going to get one for him or help him build one. We're going to do it together. And she had this, whole plan for it. She woke up the next morning and he built one himself.
Yeah.
It wasn't perfect, but he had figured out how to take like a hollow tube and then just had like a shaft that would go in and it would pop something out the other end. Like a little, I think he even like carved it or sanded a little wood ball or bead that would go out. And so he made his own pop gun all by himself. And so,
cool.
She knew that was an interest of his. And so she was already pursuing it. And what I took away was just really, do we sit there and we underestimate our children's abilities?
Oh, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. All the time I do. But are we giving them the freedom to prove us wrong?
Right. Yeah. How much are we hovering?
Yep.
So one thing I did want to point out, he talks about, in my own life and with the benefit of a quarter century of hindsight, I now see that leaving high school is actually an enabling factor, not so much for the doors it opened and the so-called opportunities it presented, but for having played a role in changing my view of what mattered, for having freed me to make my own way in this world before I had so much invested material, emotionally, physically in a more traditional path. And one thing, they aren't a faith-based family. So one thing too, I just put on the side is being both of us are families of faith. God's will matters. Keep in mind the source of philosophy of the author. So I want my kids to always feel a strong sense of purpose and calling because they know their Savior and they know their Father in heaven. Right. So that their philosophy of life should actually be very consistent and should not need to be changed, but just how it plays out. So it just kind of pinged my mind a little bit when I read that, I have to remember too, who is building into my heart and mind, and to just remember that their perspective might be a little different, foundationally.
And I was thinking that when we were talking about conviction, I'm certain the conviction was given to me from God, to homeschool my children. It wasn't my own independent random thought. Right. That was God speaking to me over years and years and showing me that this was what he wanted.
Right. And yet another reason why someone can't just sit there and say, oh, but your kids might not know how to talk in a group of 20 people. and be socialized in that way, I'm like, okay, well, I'm following God's calling. So I'm...
Right. That might not be their calling.
Yeah.
Maybe they never need to sit in a group and talk to 25 people at the same time.
Right. Yeah. They might not have to present in a classroom ever or at a business meeting ever. Who knows where they're heading, you know, and they'll be given their own challenges and struggles throughout life. I don't have to...
strengths.
And strengths. Yeah. And I do not need to synthetically have that created for them.
No.
Yeah. So, anyway, so that was, chapter 5.
Yes.
Chapter 6 is a short one, so this probably won't take as long. I found my theme that I found for Big Sticks, chapter 6, was their connection to home and their conviction of sacrifice. Oh, so this is where they talk about the sacrifices that they have made and their eyes on what is important.
Right.
So, and it's all about building the home.
Yep.
And that's probably where then he goes into more about building the, he does. He goes into
all
building
the
the home.
sacrifice.
Yeah. And you know, out of the blue, I wrote here, out of the blue, Maisie said today, I love our home. Just out of the blue.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, good. I've made a home that they love. And that is their conviction. That is a big conviction of theirs, to make a home that they have learned in, that they have, that they love. And that's important to me.
Yeah. And that's what Ben was talking about in this chapter. He was talking about, like, every time he looks at the spot where he watched his wife give birth to their sons, you know, all of these things are just so meaningful because he literally built their house with his own 2 hands.
Right.
Lots of help from friends and maybe family too, you know, people who are willing to help and hired help as well, but mostly him.
Yeah. And I have my eyes teared up when he was talking about a friend that helped them raise the frame of their house, and he had helped him, and then he died when he was like, I don't know, 40 or something. And it's like, wow, but you had you had amazing moments with them. It wasn't just sitting and watching movies. It was building a house together.
Right. And they reciprocated.
Yeah.
Because he helped his friend
community.
also do that. Yeah.
So there's the impact that kind of using not just your mind, but also your body in relating with your community. And so there's one. Okay. So in Ask the Cows, so every chapter has this little 1 or 2 pager that they, I don't know, use an analogy of their
like a little
homestead.
mini chapter, an anecdote almost, or
it's called Ask the Cows. And he says, the boys are unfazed by the constant deluge. I never know how to say it. I'm not articulate.
Yeah. That one's good.
Indeed, they seem to hardly notice it, and not for the first time. I wonder to what extent our children's reactions are learned rather than innate. Here's the part I love. Is it possible that the only difference between a child who plays in the rain and the one who does not is that the latter has been taught to avoid the rain? And we do all these things without even knowing.
Totally.
And so that made my mind immediately go to, I would go to Disneyland purposely, because I had passed, purposely when it rained. Partly because I thought it would be less crowded.
Yeah.
But also I thought, this is good for them. This is good for them to learn how to enjoy a day outside in the rain, figuring out how to handle wet shoes. Like my waterproof boots were wet through my socks. And I had a Mary Poppins moment. It was so windy that right when I was wearing my baby, pushing the other 2 in the Bob stroller, which I didn't realize the cover wasn't on all the way, so they were completely soaked to the bone. And I was holding an umbrella while pushing the Bob. And right when the wind gusted up and made my umbrella go the opposite way, I happened to turn, and I literally saw on Main Street, that happened to a bunch of people on Main Street. They're all umbrellas flapped up, and actually pushed a woman over on the ground.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, this is the nanny scene on Mary Poppins. Like when they're
all
holding on for dear life. Yeah.
It's really
and it was at Disneyland. It was so funny, but I just thought, and I was like, like that gives them inner strength. And even 2 years ago, I had them dress up in costume knowing it was going to rain. But saying, if you want to go to Europe someday, you gotta figure out how to have fun in the rain and not worry about hair and not worry about wet feet and just
gonna rain.
Yeah, and just gird yourself. Like
It's
get
just
some
rain.
grit. Yeah. And so I just love that he said that. Like, yeah, let's not avoid the hard things. Let's do them and find the fun, you know.
Yep.
So that was just a funny little anecdote.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, anything else from you
No,
for chapter 6?
no,
All right. Well, that's Homegrown. I seriously feel like anyone listening to this will not need to read the book.
They don't need to read it, but it's still good. We're only paraphrasing and pulling out the things that
that impacted us. So, and there's so much in there that, we're not pulling out.
But if you don't want to, you've got a great summary.
Yeah, totally. So, let's hear your joy.
Okay. It is Nutcracker season.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, so it's happening? Oh.
Yeah. So we're deciding to go for it. So assuming nothing goes backwards in the way of, phases and reopening, we should be able to be in theater.
Awesome.
Yeah. We won't be able to have our live orchestra.
Oh.
We can't get that many kids down in an orchestra pit, but that's okay. Small concession.
Will there be an audience?
There will, we presume, I don't know.
Yeah.
The performance won't be until the first weekend of December.
Yeah,
So
so
we won't
hopefully.
know. But we're going to go forward with it. And so we don't buy costumes. The studio I teach for, we own the costumes. So there's just a little less risk. If it doesn't happen, we're not scrambling to put on something. We can just credit them or give them their money back.
Right.
So that makes it a little bit easier as far as us feeling like we have to deliver something.
Right.
There's no scramble at the end or trying to find a new location or perform outside in December.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It rains almost every Nutcracker.
Oh, wow. Funny.
Load in, load out, it's raining.
Yeah. Oh, funny.
Yeah, and recital's like 1,000 degrees, so because that's in July. So
yeah.
that's like our theater traditions,
Yeah.
But I'm really excited about Nutcracker. I help choreograph the younger students, and then I stage manage the production. So for me, it's just a really fun outlet, and it's a great tradition for my school year or my year. It's part of our whole fall.
And I love that it's not a huge commitment. It's like 10 weeks or something, right?
Yeah, it boils down to about 8 to 9 Saturdays,
Totally
and then
doable.
performance, and it's
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
So
Every year I've wanted to do it, but it's not worked out so far.
we'll
yet.
see.
Yeah,
So
we'll see.
it's Nutcracker season. That's my huge joy in life right now.
That's awesome. Well, my joy sounds like not a joy, but you'll hear how it is.
Okay.
So our AC has leaked now a couple times because the coils were blocked, come to find out, after an actual repairman came. But anyways, the water leaked all into the walls and they're like bubbling, and I'm poking the bubbles and getting the water out of the drywall and stuff. But what was cool was, since my husband is getting more handy, the longer we're owning a house and the longer we want to try and save some money, and
He's figuring it
yeah,
out.
and since he brews his own beer,
Right.
he had buckets and tubes and things to siphon water out. So he goes up in the attic, which no one ever wants to do in a California home. He goes up into the attic and has never done that.
Right.
And
your AC was on because it was 100 degrees.
it was 115 degrees.
Yeah, that was
114.
the hottest, record-breaking heat we've had.
Yeah. So he goes up there and then he calls to my 10-year-old son and he says, "Hey, come help me siphon this water out." So I just love, having my son get involved instead of him calling out to me, which I'm glad about that too. But instead of him calling out to me, my husband automatically saw it as an educational experience for the kids. And he just called the oldest one over. And then, a year ago when we needed to change out our toilets because our water does so much damage to it or something, I don't even know. We had to change them out. He had my son join him for that too.
Awesome.
And he just watched some YouTubes and did it. It's not like he knew how to do it.
No, yeah.
But and so I'm just loving, that brings me joy seeing my son learning some skills now that my husband is only learning now.
Right.
So that he's getting equipped for a future with having a family. And I'm always like, as long as either the husband or the wife knows how to do this, then you're good. But when neither one of you know how to do it, it's hard. It costs money. And so that just brought me joy seeing that.
Good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Anyways, that was a very long anecdote there, but
Oh, well.
Oh well, yeah. All right, so that's Homegrown, chapters 4, 5, and 6. Our next one will be in a month, and it'll be chapters 7, 8, and 9.
That's right.
And those are called The Downside of Convenience, The Work of the World, and Risk and Responsibility. So we're getting closer to the end of the book.
Yep.
All right, so that's it. See you next time.